Great. Well, good afternoon, everybody. This is Matt Schaefer with the Council of State Governments, and we want to thank everybody so much for your interest in this exciting opportunity. And we're excited to get to talk to all of you today to explain this project, explain the assistance that we're providing to professions to develop new interstate compacts for occupational licensure. And we're excited from all of the interest that we've seen so far amongst the professions to further enhance license mobility for their practitioners. So glad all of you all could join us today. Very quickly, we have a lot on our agenda today that we wanted to get through, but I wanted to just do a brief overview of the CSG National Center for Interstate Compacts. So the National Center for Interstate Compacts is a policy program that's been developed by the Council of State Governments to assist states in developing interstate compacts, which we'll get into the nuts and bolts of what is an interstate compact here in a few minutes. But the Compact Center has been around for most of CSG's existence, about 75 years, promoting multi-state problem solving and advocating for the role of the states in jointly solving issues that cross state lines. And so during our time as an organization at the Council of State Governments, we've begun tracking the progress of about 200 active interstate compacts, as well as assisting states in developing new interstate compacts. And the Compact Center serves as an information clearinghouse, as well as a provider of training and technical assistance, and the primary facilitator in assisting states in the review, revision, and creation of new interstate compacts. So we've been at this a really long time. We have a long history of working with states on this particular issue in developing these agreements. So with that, I want to hand it over to my colleague, Marcus Beauregard, who is the director of the Defense State Liaison Office at the Department of Defense, and he wanted to welcome everyone and just provide a brief overview of the impetus behind this project.
Thank you very much, Matt. I want to echo Matt's words as far as the welcoming everyone, and to express our appreciation for the interest in this particular project. You might be asking yourself, why the Department of Defense? Why is the Department of Defense working on this particular issue? And it has to do with military spouses. Military spouses have been what I've often called in conferences as far as license portability, sort of the canary in the coal mine. They have a rather daunting requirement to try to keep a career going. They move about every 3 years. And so part of that for licensed occupations is obviously the need to transfer their license. And we've been working on this issue diligently for about the last 8 years. And we initially worked with states on state-specific solutions and found that those still required considerable amount of effort in terms of the military spouse. And we found out about the potential that interstate compacts offered in terms of license portability and the ability for that vehicle to essentially solve an interstate problem with an interstate solution. And we started working with the occupations that have developed these interstate compacts, and they have put in special provisions for military spouses to accommodate their residency anomalies. They're not like all other citizens in terms of their residency, but they're providing that kind of portability that is essential for somebody that moves a lot. We were engaged in this whole process. And at one point I was talking to staff members, professional staff members of the United States Senate, and they asked, what can we do to help military spouses in this area? And I said, it's basically a state's requirement, but we're working on these compacts. And one of the limitations that we've found in terms of occupations engaging in the development of an interstate compact is just the resources necessary to engage in the process. And they were more than willing. They were very happy about this opportunity to support military spouses through this compact process. And they also recognize that this is not something that is a game changer necessarily just for military spouses, but for all practitioners within an occupation. Understanding that even from the standpoint of the military and the Department of Defense, we're looking at categories of practitioners that may not be covered as an active duty military spouse, a reserve component spouse, a separating service member, a veteran. They all can take advantage of this opportunity. And as I said, the Congress recognized that this has great potential for all practitioners within an occupation. So we are very excited about this opportunity and just delighted that there are people who are interested in seeking out this particular opportunity. I want to turn it over to Matt to lead you through how this whole process is going to work. So thank you, Matt.
Great, thank you, Marcus. And before we do that, before we get into the specifics of the assistance that is available to professions, I want to first invite my colleague Dan Logston, and he's going to just do a brief overview of what is an interstate compact. So, Dan?
Hey, thanks, Matt. Welcome, everybody. Really appreciate you getting on today. We want to give you a brief overview of what interstate compacts and then licensure compacts are to help give you some grounding. We know that we'll have a lot of questions, so we want to get through this as quickly as possible to get to those questions, but we feel like it's important to give you this grounding. So, I mean, when you're thinking about an interstate compact, there are contracts between and among states. They're binding. These are very powerful tools that states use, not for every issue, but for important issues where they believe uniformity, universality is important, like occupational licensure. Everyone on this call probably has an example of an interstate compact near you or with you right now, and that's your driver's license. That wasn't a federal law that was passed. That was an agreement that states worked out among themselves so that, if I wanted to use my Kentucky driver's license to drive in Indiana or Missouri or wherever, that I didn't have to, contact those states and get permission or, as long as I adhere to the rules of the roads in those states, my license is valid. So these are things that not a lot of folks have heard of, but believe me, you come into contact with them all the time. Next slide, please. And so again, these mechanisms have been around since colonial days. There was a compacts clause in the Articles of Confederation. There's a compacts clause in the U.S. Constitution. Obviously, originally states used them to resolve boundary issues and access to natural resources. And in the early part of the 20th century, in fact, in 1922, we're coming up on the 100th anniversary, New York and New Jersey used them. Used an interstate compact to enter into a contract with each other on how they would govern New York Harbor. And now that compact, again, it's almost 100 years old. I think it's a $9 billion agency. It's thousands of employees, probably half of them attorneys. But these have been used for a plethora of issues. About 10 years later, 7 Western states entered the Colorado River Compact. And then after that, states started really looking at these mechanisms for administrative type functions. So you had the original iteration of, a compact for juveniles, juvenile offenders and adult offenders and children that are in foster care and, low-level nuclear waste. And in the latter half of the 20th century, early part of the 21st century, the National Conference on State Boards of Nursing came together to create the first occupational licensure compact. It's in its second iteration now. We'll get to it a little later, but you can see the progression on how states have used these mechanisms. So let's go on to the next slide, Keith. And this is just sort of a heat map. All states belong to about 24 interstate compacts, some a little bit less, some a lot more. But these are mechanisms that states routinely use for a number of issues, a number of administrative issues. So, you know, we'll hear from time to time, and it's really on us to do a better job educating state policymakers that you know, I'm not sure my state would ever enter into one of these. It's like, well, your state's probably a member of 24 of these interstate compacts. So these are mechanisms that states currently rely on. Let's go to the next slide. So, you know, just there's about 215 active interstate compacts. There's 5 national compacts. So there's the Emergency Management Assistance Compact, the Military Children's Compact Commission. That's the most recent national compact. And by that national, we mean all states and territories are members. There's the Interstate Compact for Adult Offender Supervision, the Interstate Juvenile Compact, and then the Interstate Compact for the Placement of Children. There's actually another version of the Interstate Compact for the Placement of Children out among the states. I think it's got 14 states. Once it gets 35, it'll supplant the current one. Let's go on to the next couple of slides. And then, yeah, the next one. Okay, great. So for the licensure compact, so, you know, we currently have the Nurse Licensure Compact that I mentioned originally. The Nurse Licensure Compact, the original Nurse Licensure Compact, had 25 states in it. It had some deficiencies that needed to be corrected. Interstate Commission provisions for FBI fingerprint-based criminal background checks. It required every practitioner to get that compact license. So, but with all those things that states didn't like, it still got up to 25 member states in it. They came together in the first part of the previous decade, decided they were going to rewrite it, reintroduce it. They did. Now the current version of the Nurse Licensure Compact has 34 states. We expect that to grow. All these licensure compacts have the ambition of being national in scope, which CSG defines as 45 states and up. Then there's the EMS Licensure Compact. So that's for emergency management personnel in non-gubernatorial declared disasters. The Medical Licensure Compact, that's for physicians, has 31 states. The Physical Therapy Compact has 28 states. PsyPact, the Psychology Interstate Compact, has 15 states. And then the Compact for Audiologists and Speech Language Pathologists, which just went out to the states in January of this year. And even with COVID and state legislatures, you know, truncating their sessions and limiting the scope of what they were going to consider, it still got 6 states this year. We expect it to activate next year. That number in parentheses out to the side that says state threshold, that's how many states are required to enact it before it's ready to start doing business. Again, that's just sort of the launching pad. Then they all, again, have the ambition of being national in scope. And then we've got 3 compacts now that we're working on. The Occupational Therapy Compact is ready to go. States are already introducing that. We have a compact for licensed professional counselors. With hope, it'll be available by 2021. We're in the final stages of wrapping that up. And then we're working with the Federation of State Medical Boards on a compact for physician's assistants. They got a federal HRSA grant to complete that project. And then just some numbers about, you know, this is really an idea whose time has come. So since January of 2016, you've seen 137 separate pieces of licensure compact legislation enacted out in the states. 42 states belong to at least one of these licensure compacts, and 28 states have enacted at least 3. And we expect that number to grow next year. There's a lot of interest because of the pandemic, especially in the nursing compact, in the medical compact, but you're also seeing interest in all these licensure compacts. So, and this is just another heat map. We won't spend too much time on this to kind of give you a feel for how many states have joined these various licensure compacts. Let's go on to the next slide. And then again, what's driving interest? Well, you know, frankly, the federal government is a big part of that. You're seeing the federal government, and they have been for, I think, the only policy area where there's even a little bit of overlap between the Obama administration and the Trump administration, and then the incoming Biden administration, is asking states tough questions about occupational licensure. CSG is a part two large Department of Labor grants. One, we're a subcontractor with the National Conference of State Legislatures, which is ending, I think, next month. And then we've got another Department of Labor grant where, again, we're looking at occupational licensure in the states. About 6 to 8 years ago, federal government started asking some very tough questions to states around occupational licensure, and frankly, they didn't like the answer. And so, states are making strides. One of the things that the federal government gets frustrated with is portability and reciprocity of licensure. It's like, I have a valid license to be a physical therapist in Kentucky. That ought to be good enough for every other state. And you have to explain to them, it's like, yeah, it's not that simple to just automatically, bam, I can take that license and go everywhere. It works, I guess, just fine until something terrible happens, and then you're really limiting the regulator's authority to deal with it. You're seeing advances in state technology around telehealth. We are in an increasingly mobile world. This is definitely going to, compacts help to address availability of professionals and access to care issues. You do, again, see a lot of the compacts, or excuse me, professions that have these compacts use them not necessarily as a recruiting tool, but something to put forward to the folks that are thinking about entering the profession. And then all these licensure compacts, either in the language in the compact or in rules, have robust provisions to support military spouses. And then we talked about all the bills that have been passed in the last few years, so they do have a proven track record. Let's go on to the next slide. And then specifically, so we'll go through these next 3 or 4 slides pretty quickly and then get to what this grant offering specifically has in store. So for practitioners, increased mobility, you're allowed to leverage the technology. All these compacts allow for practice via telehealth. And then, practical advancements, again, for current and future practitioners, stronger professional development, reducing barriers, again, not necessarily a recruiting tool, but something to hold up to folks that may be thinking about entering your profession. And then again, the supporting military spouses. And then let's go to the next one. And then for state licensing boards, for the regulators, so there's an agreement on the uniform licensure requirement. So you can get some sort of good feeling about the fact that, we do have some uniformity here, that these practitioners are meeting requirements that I also want my practitioners to meet. All these licensure compacts really have a dual goal. One is, yes, to facilitate interstate practice. The other is to, expand that public safety net to allow regulators to more effectively regulate the profession, especially when you've got this enhanced mobility. So these compact data systems that all the licensure compacts have, they're very robust. And, that's a benefit we've heard from the professions that currently had them from their state boards. And then again, the increased access to practitioners. Let's go to the next one. And then, for states, again, better access to care. We believe that these compacts strengthen state sovereignty and state autonomy, or state sovereignty. You have right now, as a state, if you're not a member of one of these licensure compacts, you're essentially relying on the goodwill, if you need to investigate a practitioner in another state, of that state's licensing board. And while states really try to help each other out, sometimes, it's more difficult than others. Under these compacts, they're required to do that. And so your ability to act against the practitioner really ends at your state border, unless you're a member of one of these licensure compacts, and then certainly you can extend your reach. We have seen these compact commissions that are created out of these licensure compacts become forums for regulators as they address issues in the profession. And then again, we think they strengthen labor markets. You're seeing a lot of states now look to these universal licensure laws, where if you've got a license in good standing from one state, you can bring it to another state and they'll give you a license. Those are not incongruent with what we're trying to accomplish with these interstate compacts, but really those laws only help practitioners from out of state. If a state passes an interstate licensure compact, it allows for a larger market for their practitioners. And then again, we talk about protecting the public and expanding that safety net. And I think, Keith, is that? And then, yeah, some additional benefits. So we've talked about military families. Frankly, we've talked about all these, and then the greater mobility. So we see these as a real win-win, both for practitioners and for the states. They're not simple to do. There certainly have a lot of moving parts. but we feel they're an idea. Its time has come. And if you look back at the track record of the number of states that have enacted them, I believe you could draw the same conclusion that the states do as well. And I think if we have somewhat of a normal set of legislative sessions, if the pandemic doesn't curtail them too much, I think you're going to see an explosion of states that are members of these licensure compacts, because legislators do see them as a means to addressing some of the issues that they've discovered with healthcare in their state as a result of the pandemic. So with that, I think I'll turn it back over to Matt.
Great, thank you, Dan. And just briefly wanted to note that, as Dan said, we wanted this to this webinar to be as informative to you as possible. So although we're briefly going over this material, we want to leave ample time for you to be able to ask questions. So if you have a specific question, please just ask it in the chat, and then we'll get to that in the Q&A portion at the end that we're hoping is a longer extended period of time that we can get to all of your questions. So I am going to talk a little bit about our compact development process, and particularly what we are offering you, the profession, in this opportunity to develop a new interstate compact. So how do we develop interstate compacts? What does the process look like? So really it's a three-phased process made up of development, education, and enactment, and then transition in operation. So in phase one, really our first step for working with the profession to develop an interstate compact is to convene what we call an advisory group, or a technical assistance group. And really the purpose of that group, it's usually made up of about 15 to 20 individuals. Those would be folks from state boards, professional associations, subject matter experts that are particular to that profession. And so this group really examines the issue of mobility as a whole, examines current practices, current state policy, best practices, regulatory structures. And really the goal of this group is to establish the uniform requirements that are going to eventually end up in the interstate compact. So it establishes a list of recommendations. Hey, we, the advisory group, think all of these things are essential that need to end up in the draft compact language. And so we'll do that over the course of several meetings, convening that advisory group together. The next step is the drafting team. So that's a smaller group of about 5 to 8 individuals that actually sit down and do the dirty work of writing the compact legislation. They craft the draft compact based on the recommendations that were received from the advisory group. And then there's the process of doing some stakeholder feedback review. The drafting team will send the draft language back to the advisory group, and there's kind of a back and forth until they settle on the final model compact legislation that will eventually be enacted in states. So that's the third step. There is finalizing the final product, and in the final product is the model legislation that will then go out to states to be enacted. And we always say we keep track of state enactment just because in order for the compact to be binding, in order for the core tenets of the compact to remain, the language can't be altered it can be altered to an extent, but not any significant amount. So that's just to make sure that states aren't changing anything that is a core tenet of the compact.
Yeah,
Phase
Matt,
two,
hey, this is Dan. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
There can't be any substantive changes to the compact. So if there's some quirks with your legislative service agency about how a bill ought to be presented, we can work with you on those. But it's a contract, so everybody has to enter into substantively the same language. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Right. Yeah, Dan, and feel free to jump in anytime
No, you're fine.
that I'm talking here. So, phase 2, education and enactment. So that's where CSG works with policymakers to support the enactment of the model legislation in the states. So we convene legislators together to educate them on the compact, provide state support legislative testimony and things to support the enactment of the compact in the states, and provide talking points for legislators, a legislative resource kit with key states and key legislators who often pass these compacts. So, and really our goal at CSG is to support the profession as they work to enact the compact in the states. And then phase 3, transition and operation. So one thing that I didn't mention as a part of the compact development is each profession will set a threshold for how many states need to pass the compact in order for it to be active. So I think most of the professions that have developed compacts in the past have settled on somewhere between, I think 10 is usually about the median point. So once the compact hits 10 states that have passed it, that triggers the activation of the compact and triggers the establishment of the governing board, which is called the Interstate Commission, which will govern compact activities. So each state gets one representative that they can send to be their representative on the Interstate Commission, and they just govern the compact activities and ensure that the compact is achieving its mission in supporting licensure mobility. And so every state that has passed the compact has one participating member on that commission. And then there's just the ongoing operation of the compact and trying to get as many states to pass it as possible, and work to set up the shared data system that will help the states communicate with each other about disciplinary matters and who is actively using the compact. So what are we offering with this assistance particularly? That last slide was CSG's compact development process generally, but what are we offering with this particular opportunity? So like Marcus said at the very beginning, CSG realizes that professions, and particularly the regulatory community, licensing boards, have very limited resources to dedicate to this type of effort, and particularly during COVID-19. So CSG and the Department of Defense are offering assistance to profession in the development of interstate compacts. So on the next slide, we can see that CSG is not offering funds to applicants. Where this is not a sub-grant agreement where CSG will give money to applicants, but the Department of Defense has given CSG funds, and we are funding all compact activities on behalf of the profession. So that includes the convenings that I mentioned earlier, and doing the National Legislative Summit that will convene legislators together to help pass the compact, convening the drafting team, and developing that legislative resource kit. So those are the things that CSG is funding as a part of this opportunity. And I also just wanted to note here that CSG has every intention to convene these groups in person in 2021, but we want to continue to follow the CDC recommendations in terms of in-person meetings. So we have every intention of doing these convenings in person, and we believe that they're most effective when they're done in person. But there is the potential that at least during the first 6 months or so of 2021, when we're convening these groups together, that they will be done virtually. So again, this is the same chart from before, but just highlighting the things that we are offering as a part of this assistance. So we are offering to convene an advisory group to study the issue, to develop those recommendations that that we talked about. We're going to convene drafting teams. We're going to produce model legislation, and then we are going to work to educate legislators and policymakers on the new compact and give the applicant a legislative toolkit to go and support the enactment in their state. So in all the states. So if you think about the previous flow chart where you saw the standing up of the Interstate Commission, the shared data system, the actual enactment of the compact in the states, that is not covered by the scope of this opportunity, but what we are offering to states is developing the model legislation and working with the policymakers to educate them on the compact. So again, just running through kind of the schedule, the timeline that we're working with on this project. So the application process is open. We're receiving applications as of the date the RFP was sent out in November, and the application due date is February 1st, 2021. And you can download the application on our website at compacts.csg.org. And there's a tab called How to Apply that you just click on and download the application. And then the next step is selection of the profession. And so CSG and the Department of Defense are going to review all the applications and make selections, and we're going to make multiple selections. So this is not one profession only being selected, but I would anticipate multiple professions being selected for this opportunity. And applicants can expect an announcement to be made in early spring, likely March. So in the next step, once the profession is selected, we'll begin work immediately to start to work to put together that advisory group that we talked about, and convene that group through multiple meetings over the course of 2021. And then we'll convene the document team that's going to actually draft the model legislation. We'll have the stakeholder review process, incorporate all the changes in edits, and then we'll convene the drafting team one more time to finalize the language, and then that will the profession will have the model compact legislation that will go out to be enacted in the states. And then the last step is that education piece, and that's what we've talked about. CSG is going to convene what we call a national legislative summit, where we invite legislators from all over the country to come and learn about the new compact and help support the enactment of the compact in state legislatures. And that's really a crucial piece, because a profession we can draft the model language, and we can come up with great recommendations to include in the compact, but there are legislative hurdles that need to be that need to be addressed, and so this is the place to do that, to talk to legislators about common misconceptions around interstate compacts, the specifics of the compact for this particular profession, and give the legislators some talking points as it goes through the legislative process, through committee and such. So
Matt, this Dan, just
sure.
We typically invite someone from the regulatory board as well. So, just to make sure that they can interact with that legislator and answer any questions.
Yes. So at that National Legislative Summit, we'll have legislators and your state board representative as well. All right. And so, like I mentioned earlier, applications are due February 1st. There's the link where you can download the application. And we also want to emphasize that CSG is available for technical assistance throughout this this project, throughout the application process specifically. And you know, some things that we can talk to you about as you think through your application, specific application instructions and requirements. We can talk through the compact development process again. We can talk through the feasibility of a compact for your profession. We can talk about any number of issues that arise as you're developing your application. I think it's helpful just to sit down with staff from the Compact Center and just talk through where are commonalities in your profession, in how it's regulated among the states. Do you have a national exam? Do you have you know, uniform hour requirements for experience? And just talking through the actual requirements for licensure and some of the barriers maybe that you've ran into in the past in terms of pursuing this type of mobility for your practitioners. I think it's helpful to talk to people, specifically people who have done this type of compact development in the past to help you overcome some of those hurdles. And so in order to request any technical assistance, just send an email to our email, our shared inbox at compacts@csg.org. And then this slide just has what I just went over in regards to technical assistance that is available to you as a profession. There's our contact information for Dan, who's the Compact Center director, and for me, I'm a project manager helping manage the application process. So we're always available for questions, like I said. And at this point, I think we are ready to move into our Q&A portion of the webinar. So we have about 20 minutes. And just a reminder, please send your questions into the chat and we will answer them as promptly as we can. So I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, James Tatum, who is going to moderate the question and answer portion.
Thank you, Matt. And I see we're getting more questions coming in. We have about 5 now, and I'll be adding as people type them in. Okay. So the first question is from Lucas. Why isn't the State Authorization Reciprocity Agreement, or SARA, considered a compact? And what is the benefit or detriment of an interstate agreement versus an interstate compact?
Yeah, I'm not aware of the vagaries of NC SARA as much as I probably should be, but I mean, you know, an interstate compact is binding. It's been enacted by the legislature, allowed to become law by the governor, either over their signature or, you know, laid on their desk for 15 days, or whatever the means is. But it's a binding on the member states. So I apologize. I really just don't know enough about NC SARA to speak to that.
Well, and actually, Jeff Litwack is on the call as well, and he offered to field the question if you'd like him to talk a little bit more about it.
Sure.
Okay.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jeff Litwack. I'm a legal advisor to the Council of State Governments. I understood the question to ask, what's the difference between an interstate agreement versus an interstate compact? And the answer to that is there really isn't a difference. That term compact or agreement isn't significant. It's the form of the agreement or the form of the compact that is significant. And there are lots of examples of compacts that use different terms. One of the examples that I like to use is the Pacific Northwest Emergency Management Arrangement. So it doesn't even use the word compact or agreement, and yet it's still a compact.
All right, and the next question that we have is from Anne. Are representatives that become part of the commission volunteers from the state, or are they paid for their services?
Yeah, so typically in the licensure compacts I've been a part of drafting and the current ones that exist, it's either someone who's a member of that profession that's also a member of the state licensing board or the board administrator or another board staff, such as the general counsel. So that's typically how. So, and folks aren't typically paid to be a part of a compact commission, but certainly they, depending on the compact, they can get their expenses reimbursed. Again, in the licensure compacts that we've been a part of drafting and the current ones that exist, it's always someone associated with the state licensing board.
All right, and the next question is from Mara. She asked for a clarification. Do the states sign on during phase 1 before their legislators are educated about the compact? No,
and they don't really. We'll have folks from various states that help create the compact, but that's not obligating you in any way. So when we do for this project, that advisory group or the technical assistance group, we're just trying to get a group of intelligent, experienced people around the table so that we get the best advice and the best direction as we can. No one's going to show up in your state and say, legislator, you should enact this because Mary that runs the state board was a part of creating this. Ultimately it is it's a legislative prerogative, and the governor has to sign off on whether or not to join one of these licensure or to any compact for that matter.
All right, our next question is from Brian Francis. Do you have examples of compact development efforts that worked well?
Yes. So the most recent one we did for the occupational therapy profession and occupational therapy assistants, and the reasons for that, the main reason for that is that profession has spent the last 3 decades syncing up their requirements out in the states. I know folks may disagree with this somewhat, but there's really not a lot of difference between getting licensed to be an OT or an OTA in Oregon as opposed to Mississippi. That profession has done a terrific job of syncing those up, gave us a lot of uniformity to grab onto. So Rick Masters, another one of our council, like Jeff Litwack, very lucky to have both of them associated with it, with the Compact Center. Rick Masters likes to say that compacts thrive on uniformity. And so an example where we were able to really have a lot of uniformity to work with was the OT profession. I think I saw this question in the chat. So an example of when one didn't work well. So far for these licensure compacts, we haven't run into that issue, but in the aughts, CSG was a part of 2 projects, one to create a compact around prescription drug monitoring, and then a compact on high voltage power lines and how power can be moved across state lines. Both those compacts were written. They never really achieved any critical mass out in the states. One reason for the prescription drug monitoring compact that never really got off and running was that you had a number of vendors and a number of states that created a workaround and didn't feel like they needed a compact, although the jury's still out on that. And then for the high voltage power lines, it was one of those topics that when the financial crisis hit in 2008, the wind just went out of that project.
All right, and thanks for getting the rest of that one. The next question is from John. How much financial and organizational resources would we typically need to commit to sustaining the effort described in item 9 of the application? And can you give a ballpark?
Yeah, I mean, it'll just depend on the profession, and we can certainly talk with you about that. I mean, typically, it's once we present you with the compact, then, you've got to, get it enacted in the states and deal with the legislature, and you'll have to deal with committee council and deal with Deputy Attorney General's office, and then standing up the compact commission and all those sorts of things. I'm hesitant to give you a number. And then once the compact commission gets stood up, there's, locating the funding to create that robust data system. Now that's anywhere between $500,000 and $1 million. There's certainly funding. There's some funding available through this project to help mitigate the cost of the data system. And those costs are coming down all the time. The PT compact and the nursing compact have robust data systems. They're willing to share a lot of information and to help get these compact databases off the ground. But it's certainly something that is a significant cost to create those data systems. So, but we can certainly work with you. I think based on your profession, we'd probably be able to give you a better answer. But maybe about $500,000 to finish out to get to the 50 state threshold. But again, could be more, could be a little less. But I'll ballpark it. But if it turns out to be more, don't come back and say, Dan, you said that was only going to be, because we just don't know until we start working with your profession. I wish we had a better answer.
All right. And the next one is from Jane Wood. Do you have a timeline regarding the selection process in early March for the development and dissemination pieces?
Well, again, that'll depend. So as we hope to, sometime in March or April, be able to identify the professions that, have been selected for this first tranche. We'll have a subsequent selection process as well. But how long it takes to complete the compact is really, frankly, it depends on the profession and depends on, all the variables that go into how that profession's regulated, et cetera. So, again, we were able to create the OT compact in right at a year, which was, pretty remarkable, frankly, but again, aided by all the work that they've done for decades leading up to this. If your profession hasn't been able to do a lot of that work, it doesn't make a compact impossible, but it might make our time line a little extend some.
And I saw a subsequent question related to timeline, and they were asking about the state enactment. So after the compact is written, what's the typical time until the Interstate Commission is stood up and that threshold is reached?
Yeah, I think 2 years is a good rule of thumb on getting the Interstate Commission stood up. Again, I'll go back to the OT compact. They go out to the states in January. If we knew that 2021 was going to be a normal year for legislatures, I'd wager they'd probably get 10 states next year, just because they're that lined up out in the states. But I think 2 years is frankly more realistic.
All right. And the next one we have here from Kyle. Are there professions that are a priority for the Department of Defense or CSG?
No, we're going to take all the applications as they come. And, Matt mentioned the technical support that CSG can provide in creating your application. And I'd encourage you to take advantage of that. We'd love to work with you. We've been approved by the Department of Defense to do that because ultimately CSG isn't making the decision. The Department of Defense is making the decision. So, we can help you as much as you like. So, but yeah, I mean, there's really, everybody's got a chance.
Okay. And from Stephanie, are the expenses reimbursed from the state?
Are the expenses reimbursed? I don't know.
If that's a question about the compact development expenses, all of that is being funded by CSG, so those won't flow through the state. If it's a question about the expenses related to the ongoing compact activities, like the operation of the compact, Dan, do you want to talk about expenses from a state standpoint?
Yeah, I mean, typically, there'll likely be a cost for the state board to enter, not a fee, but just a cost as far as, getting your software squared away and sorted out to interface with that compact data system. All these licensure compacts have language that allows them to assess the states for their operation. Currently only 2 do that. The nursing compact assesses states across the board $6,000 a year. SIPAC, the psychology interstate compacts, has a sliding scale based on the number of folks that get the compact privilege from your state. But typically, thus far, none have, relied on state support for their operations. If we answer that properly.
Yeah, and Stephanie, if you have a clarification, yeah, it seems like that was good. But if there's anything else you'd like to know, feel free to write another one. From Laura, are state boards the only groups who can apply, or can professional membership associations apply?
Nope. We've seen the gamut of, we've seen a large swath of folks that have applied for, or that have created these licensure compacts in the past. So you've seen it driven by membership associations, and you've seen it driven by state board federations or associations. And then, you've seen, the membership association take the lead, but also have assistance with like a certification organization for the profession. So there's lots of ways you can do it.
Okay, yeah. And the next question from Andrea, how are professional organizations involved in this process?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think we're professional so for professions that really don't have that sort of state board association or state regulatory association that, is robust and has all the state boards as members, you have seen a reliance on membership organizations, and that particularly comes in handy when they're trying to get it enacted out in the states, because they have a network that they can activate to support them.
Okay, and this is from Josh. One project my organization is working on is how to create pathways to increase licensing among immigrants. Is that something these compacts and CSG's plans in this field would plan to address? Immigrants often, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, no, I mean, we're strictly focused on, this occupational licensure aspect. That's something that we actually looked at as part of that first Department of Labor grant that I mentioned, where we're working with the National Conference of State Legislatures. But for these, no, it's licensure mobility.
All right, and the next one is from Elena. At Western Governors University, we see this problem from a different angle. Our students have to deal with shifting requirements between states. How can we best partner to advocate for rationalizing this system for our students?
I think it depends on the profession, and certainly I think again, going back to these Department of Labor grants that we've been working on, you are seeing states take a hard look at their licensing practices and how they can make it easier on practitioners and how they can regulate the profession more effectively. So states understand this. This isn't a situation where states are being obstinate, where state legislators, don't want to look at the data and try to enhance both licensure portability and then, frankly, how how the profession is regulated. But, I guess, I think that's where I would start. I mean, everything's keys on state policymakers. And so those conversations with legislators and folks on licensing boards and then in the governor's office are critical to have and explain to them, because the more they hear it, frankly, the more it sinks in.
Okay. And yes, the next question was, let's see. Also from Western Governors Association, I think in particular, they were asking, can we help serve on the next drafting board? Will the next board be for a specific field or for licensing professions as a general concept? That was from Laura Pageant.
Yeah, so we've had this confusion a few weeks ago. So, the grant, we're not trying to create some sort of omnibus compact that, every profession will be under and, utilize it. That wouldn't work. So these are specifically tied, this funding, this effort is specifically tied to certain professions. So, and I'll use the professions that already have compacts to avoid any sort of confusion. So it would be specifically for physical therapist or occupational therapist or speech pathologist and audiologist or psychologist. Once we identify the professions, once DOD selects the professions that they want to fund in this first effort, this first selection process, then we'll fall back on the way we do this. So we'll do the research, we'll convene the necessary professionals that we need to, and select the folks that we want around the table, and begin that process. So, we're not we've had some of this confusion, and I apologize. It's on us. We ought to communicate a little better, but this isn't an effort to create like one gigantic compact for every profession that exists. If you're a profession and you don't want a interstate compact, I got good news for you. We're not going to make you get one. If you're a profession that wants this compact mechanisms and feels like that this funding is a great pathway to that, then please reach out to us and we'll help you complete your application.
All right, and Chuck Wilmarth asks, will there be a webinar at a future date to discuss assistance that may be available to create a data system?
Probably. We'll probably look to do that probably fourth quarter of next year. We're currently working on the application process.
Okay, and the next one is from Greg Thornton. Considering that the ASLP-IC is where it is now and NCSBN has been supporting this effort, having completed phase 1 and into phase 2, would you recommend NCSBN submitting an application given we are already receiving support?
Right. And hey, thanks, Greg. Greg was on the advisory group and I think the drafting team for the ASLP-IC. And no, so essentially what we're doing with this funding from DOD is we're creating the model language. And then we're going to give you the means to go out and work with the states. But yeah, where you guys are now, certainly the data system funding is certainly something that you guys would want to look to apply for with the Compact Commission once it gets stood up. But no, where the ASLP compact is right now, that's kind of where this funding is looking to get you most of the way there.
Okay, next one is from Michael Farron at the Mercatus Center. Building on Elena's follow-up, how can relevant experts on occupational licensing generally apply to be involved with the compact development and drafting process?
Well, so we typically hew close to folks that understand the profession explicitly. When we're and implicitly when we're developing these compacts. I think where we look to sort of broaden out our feedback loop is during the stakeholder review process. So that's where it's critical, and those are easy to track. Certainly, if you'd like to get on the list to make sure that you get the compact for the stakeholder review process, you can just reach out to Matt or me and we'll make sure that you get that. But that stakeholder review process where you can look and give us feedback on the draft and sort of bring in those universal principles and are they being addressed with this document is where that would be a good place to tie in that kind of expertise.
Okay, the next question is from Gary. On what factors will priority be given in selecting the professions?
Well, I think, I don't think DOD is interested in funding something that can't sustain itself after the compact has been created. So I think it's very important to be able to explain and to convince the Department of Defense that, they're just not going to hand you a document and you're not going to be able to do anything with it once you get it. So I think, they're interested. Certainly Congress through the Department of Defense has created a mechanism to fund the creation of these compacts. That was a big barrier for a lot of professions since my time at CSG. They just could never come up with the means to do that. But, how are you going to sustain this effort? It's important to tell that story in your application.
Yeah, Dan, and I would just emphasize, we always talk about how compacts thrive on uniformity. So that's another emphasis I would include in your application, is just highlighting where there's uniformity in how your profession is regulated. Not saying that you would never be, you are not going to be selected if you don't have uniformity among your requirements, but it does make it helpful during the compact development process for CSG to know, okay, there's a national exam, there's kind of a general agreement on number of training hours, things like that. So I would put an emphasis on that as well.
Okay, we just have one more question left. So if anyone has anything else, please be sure to put it in the chat as soon as possible. This last question is from Anne again. Are there other long-term financial obligations other than the establishment of the database that we should be aware of? Would it include state boards or the professional association?
So typically after you get the compact data system complete and the compact commission is up, you know, you're looking at, you know, how to fund this, you know, the compact commission will be charged with how to fund their ongoing operations. So these aren't typically, all the existing ones aren't boondoggles. So we're not creating these sort of staff heavy organizations. And that one reason for that is the data system does so much work. The nursing compact, you know, there's 34 member states in the nursing compact. There's 5 million nurses in America, and they have 2 dedicated staffers. So again, these aren't large organizations that you're creating, but these compact commissions are critical. So the ongoing operation of that compact commission is what is the funding aspect that you have to look at after the data system is completed. And look, so these compacts can certainly help with that. All the compacts that utilize the compact privilege model or privilege to practice model, where you know you're not getting a license in a state, but you're getting that compact privilege based on recognition of your home state license being in good standing, charge a fee for that. And so that fee structure is something that can aid in that. But certainly that's the other thing, is how to fund the ongoing operations.
All right. Well, I think that's about everything. If I missed anyone,
James, let me just say that's really up to that's the compact commission's issue to deal with, right? I mean, that's not really anything you have to figure out for the compact commission. The compact commission is going to have to figure that out, but that's something to be aware of as you move through this.
All right. Yeah, just wanted to say if I missed anyone or if anyone has any additional questions, I'll put my contact information in here. Feel free to reach out to anybody on the team if you'd like more information. And I think that's it for the questions.
Great. Thank you, James. I know we're 5 minutes over, so I will just briefly wrap up and thank everyone again for your interest, and remind everyone that CSG is available to assist you as you develop your application. So feel free to reach out and schedule a time to talk with us. And that's compact@csg.org. And that is how you can request any technical assistance. So we look forward to reviewing all of your proposals. And again, thank you so much for your interest. And we'll talk to everyone soon. Thank you.